Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. These two verses from Paul are far more important to the core of his theology than is often realized. They connect the first part of Romans in which Paul explicates the gospel as the climactic moment and fulfillment of the whole Old Testament story, and the calling of the church, the Roman church, to embody this gospel for the sake of their neighbors amidst the idolatrous Roman Empire. He urges them, in light of God's mercy revealed in the gospel, to offer up the whole of their bodily lives, every part of it, to God as living sacrifice. And in short order, he shows that there are three aspects to being a living sacrifice. First, don't be conformed to the world. By world, he means the idolatrous culture as it shares in the old age dominated by sin and evil. Second, be transformed by the renewing of your minds. Soak yourselves in the power of the gospel and immerse yourselves in the biblical story to renew your minds and your lives. And then third, you will be able to test and approve what God's will is. Then you can grow in discernment and wisdom in knowing God's will in the various areas of your lives. This difficult process can only happen along the long, hard road of discipleship and formation. We North Americans like things fast and easy, but the way of faithfulness is a long obedience in the same direction. And we have an inspiring model in the early church. They formed their new converts with a 2-year catechesis to prepare them for baptism. And they had 5 goals. First, to teach them the biblical story. All the catechisms during the 2nd and 3rd century were a telling of the biblical story. The Old Testament climaxing in Jesus Christ and in the mission of the church. And in teaching them the biblical story, secondly, they wanted to form a new identity. This story gave them a new identity as the people of God. And the biblical story was also, thirdly, to shape a new behavior and way of life. These new Christians, whose ways of life had been shaped by the spirit of Roman culture, needed to be formed into a new way of life. And fourth, they wanted to detoxify them from the idolatrous story of the Roman culture, which had shaped their identity and behavior from birth. And all of this, fifth, was to form believers to look like Jesus so that their unbelieving neighbors would be attracted to the Christian faith. The pastoral and catechetical formation had a missional goal: faithfulness before the watching eyes of the world. The goal of these videos and the study of this book is to equip you to travel down this path together, deepening your insight into the gospel and the biblical story, so that you might be renewed in your minds, so that you can growingly form a new identity, so you can increasingly manifest a new behavior. It's to deepen your grasp of the American and the Western story and worldview, so you're not conformed to the world, so you can be detoxified from the idolatry of our cultural story, and so you can love all the good of your place and seek its common good. And it's to enable you to discern what God's plan and purpose is for the world and to find your role in it. There are 4 components that you will study together. Let me state them in one sentence and illustrate them with a diagram. If we begin with the gospel of Jesus Christ, it necessarily leads us to see the Bible as a cosmic story of God's purpose in history. with a missional people at the center called to embody God's purpose for human life for the sake of the world. And they do that always in the context of cultural idolatry, which demands a missionary encounter with culture. Let me introduce you to these four themes and their cohesive unity by way of a diagram. This diagram will appear throughout the course, reminding you where we are at in our study together. We begin with the good news of Jesus Christ. His announcement was that the end and goal of cosmic history, the coming of the kingdom of God, was breaking into the middle of history. And it points back to the beginning of history where the story began, the creation of the whole world. If we begin with the gospel, we realize that we are in the middle of a grand story that begins with the creation of all things and ends with the renewal of the whole world. And at the center of this story is a people who embody the end of history within the context of history. They reflect what the true humanity that lives under God's rule and that will one day inhabit the new earth, what they look like. So the gospel leads to biblical story. And at the center of that story is a missional people who live as the new and the true humanity for the sake of the world. But this leads on to the fourth biblical theme. Israel must embody that true humanity that serves God amidst the pagan cultures of their day, cultures that serve other gods. And the church today must embody the new humanity and serve the living God amidst the idolatrous cultures of the world in which they live. This is the core of the Christian faith, the gospel of the kingdom, revealed and accomplished in Jesus Christ, the biblical story, a covenantal and missional people living for the sake of the world, and a missionary encounter with culture. It is these four things that we will explore together in our book and in the videos that follow. We begin in the next video with the question, what is the gospel?